Hi, it's Lauren. Welcome back to my channel, and I'm so excited to be in a collaboration video with my good friend Carrie Rhoades. As you may have figured out, I am a huge fan of Pearblossom Press products. I absolutely love the Easy Lights, the Power Packs, and their Halo lights. Carrie and I are collaborating today and challenging each other to use these brand new Halo lights. And I'm so excited to be a part of this with her. I absolutely love Carrie and I absolutely love Amanda from Pearblossom Press, so this is super exciting to do this today. I'm going to be making a slimline card, and I'm going to be making a scene with clouds and grass. So I am starting off with my background here. I'm using a cloudy stencil and just adding some extra blue color by using the tumbled glass. I like starting my distressing on colored paper because I use, well, one, less ink, and two, it's easy to have a softer color when you start off with that pastel blue and then add a little bit darker blue and you get the shade of a cloud above it in the lighter color. So I am going to be cutting out a piece of white cardstock using that same Slimline card builder die and my cloudy edger die. And then I'm going to do the same for the bottom. I used a piece of green cardstock and I'm going to use my grassy edge here to create a grass bottom for my Slimline card. So I've cut out these papers, like I said, using that Slimline builder die, and then use the edgers to create clouds and grass to create a nice scene on my card. And I'm going to be adding some distressing green color to my grass, and then I'm going to also color my mason jar a little bit bluer. So I'm going to be using Lucky Clover to add that green to my grass. Just like my clouds and my sky, I like starting off with a light colored paper and then bringing in shadow using this Distress Oxide ink. So I'm creating a darker green base and then bringing it up so it's lighter on the top. And that's going to go on the bottom. And then I'm also going to color in this die cut from the mason jar. I die cut it first with the mason jar and then the grassy edge because I want my mason jar to look like it's sitting in the grass, and it sounds a little weird now, but you'll see how it will come together. And then I am going to distress the edges of my blue jar using Salty Ocean just to make my jar a little bit more blue compared to my sky. I didn't want it to blend in completely. I just want the grass part to blend in so it looks like my jar is sitting in the grass. So I'm going to distress all of the edges that will be seen on this mason jar. And then I am going to adhere the lower part of the grass to that mason jar after I clean up my workstation. And the reason why I cut out this mason jar with the hole in the center is that's where my lights are going to be shining through. I wanted my lights to be inside of my mason jar, but I didn't want the halo light circle to be visible. So that is why I am having it blend in with the grass, because the grass is going to end up covering most of the power pack part of the halo light. So here I am laying out what it's going to look like on my card. As you can see, my jar is blending in a bit there with the grass, and that's the look that I am going for. So now I need to cut the same rectangular shape out of my background because I'm actually going to have another layer behind the background slimline piece. And I thought I could be stealthy and try to maneuver the paper around the die, but that didn't happen. So I'm just putting it approximately where the mason jar is going to go. It's not going to be perfectly centered, but that's okay. And I ran it through my die cut machine. So now here is the halo light. As you can see, my rectangle is a little bit larger than the center of the light, and that's why I have the grass piece to kind of cover where the part of that power pack in the mason jar is going to show. A little bit will still show when I'm done, but I'm going to use some other die cuts to cover that up. So now I need to work on the placement of my halo light as well as where I'm going to stamp the press for my card receiver to know exactly where to push to turn on the light. So I used a pencil and just made a light little spot on my grass, and now I'm going to get out my VersaFine ink in Onyx Black, as well as this tiny little stamp that says push, and I'm going to stamp that right on top of that little pencil mark that I made. Now I wish I would have scooted this over a little more to the left. I didn't think about how wide the word was when it comes to putting my mason jar all together on my card, but it's fine, you can still read it. It just is a little close to the mason jar die cut. So now I want to start assembling my mason jar on top of my cloudy background. So I am going to put on some foam tape where the grass is going to cover the blue part of my background. And I am going to make sure that the layers look good. As you can see, the push is kind of pushing it when it comes to where my mason jar is, but it ends up being just fine. So now I am just working with the layout, making sure that what I'm doing is right before I glue everything down. And I noticed that my power pack is actually a little bit lower than my rectangle, and I will have to trim some of that down. Not really sure why I didn't do that now, but you will see that I want to make sure my power pack fits inside of that rectangle so there's not this kind of bulge underneath the paper. So I peeled off all the release tape for my grass and I placed that down on top of my background. And now I'm going to layer on my mason jar, so I need a piece of foam tape on the top part, and then I will use wet glue on the bottom. So I peel off my release paper for my foam tape, center it to that rectangle that's on the background, and then I am going to use my wet glue to adhere down the bottom of the mason jar. And always make sure you keep your pin in your glue if you have that fine tip. I run into that a lot. I just set my glue down and then my glue won't come out. So now I am going to adhere that all together, make sure there's a nice adhesion before I move on. So now I'm going to add some foam tape to my cloudy scene, and I'm using scrapbook.com's foam tape. It's a 1/4 inch wide, and although I do prefer the Hefty Doodle for most of my interactive cards, I'm going to be doubling this up 2 different layers of foam tape, and I don't want it to be super thick, so that's why I'm using this more slender foam tape. I'm going to peel up that release paper and adhere those clouds down to the top of my card. And so now it's time to work on the bottom layer. So I have a brown piece of cardstock that I cut down to be my Slimline card base. It is 8.5 by 7 and it's scored at 3.5 on the 7-inch side to create an 8.5 by 3.5 card base. And then I also cut a piece of that same light blue paper to be slightly smaller than my background here. As you can see, it will be behind my card, but it won't show out of the edges of my Slimline cut background. So now I am going to work on adhering my halo lights. I pulled out the little tab that helps keep the battery from draining and made sure that my battery was secure and the mechanism works and it looks good. I put some scrapbook.com 1/4 inch double-sided adhesive roll onto the back of my halo light mechanism. I'm going to use a piece of mint tape just to help keep it lightly secure to my background. And then I am going to center it where I want my card base to be, which will help me with the placement of this halo light. And then I'm going to push down that mechanism to make sure it is nice and secure. So I just use the mint tape to keep it in place, and this allows me to make sure that my halo light is being adhered exactly where I want it to behind my background. I'm making sure the placement makes sense. I can push the push light, everything is working, and I'm very happy that I can move on to the next step. So here's when I was like, oh wait, I didn't make more room for my power pack. So I'm just going to use some of my snips and get inside of there and trim down. I will have to trim into my foam, but that's okay. I want to make sure there's plenty of room for my power pack and there is still stability in that spot because of that battery. So I'm not going to replace any of the foam. And now I can center it on there. It's flush. There's plenty of space for the power pack. I can push the push button and everything is good. So now I'm going to add that second layer of foam tape that I was talking about earlier, and I'm going to layer it all the way around my card base where it will be hidden under my cloudy background, as well as a bit there on top, as you can see, just to add more stability to my card. I peeled off all the release tape and centered my cloudy background onto the card. And now the card base is done and I can move on to decorating my card. I've cut a couple of mushrooms out of the Build-A-Fairy die set from Whimsy Stamps. I cut the base out of some vanilla cardstock and the top out of some kind of a pinkishy red color cardstock in my stash. And I am just going to place them around my mason jar. I'm decorating the edges there to make the mason jar look a little more seamless with the grass. So I'm going to glue on both of these little mushrooms, one on the left and the other will be adhered on the right. And I just absolutely love these tiny little mushrooms. I think they're just so cute. I love being able to cut them out of 2 different colors and building them onto each other. I have also die cut these pink flowers out of another Whimsy Stamps die cut set, and I am adhering those around my mushrooms and my mason jar, and I think they just add some cute color to my card. I die cut the top of my mason jar out of some sparkly cardstock to give that metallic look to my mason jar lid, and I'm just going to use some wet glue to adhere that right to the top of my mason jar. And then my favorite part is cutting out these pretty purple butterflies from another Slimline Whimsy die set. I have all of the names of the die sets I use down below in my description. And I'm just going to glue these all around the card in various spots to make it look like I'm collecting butterflies inside of my mason jar. To add some more fun to my flowers, I am using these liquid pearls in a buttercup color to add the yellow to the center of my flowers. For my sentiment, I am using a sentiment from my Gnome Think Spring set, and I'm going to stamp it in that same VersaFine ink, My Sweet Friend, onto one of my quick strips, which was die cut on a piece of vanilla cardstock, the same as my mushrooms. And I'm figuring out the placement. I added some wet glue, and now I'm going to secure it down to my card. And of course, I did this after I glued everything together, so now I have to bring out my small paper snips and trim down the edge of that quick strip. But I didn't actually secure it to the card base yet, and because it's wet glue, I had that little bit of extra time. So I pulled it off real quick and trimmed it down so that way my sentiment strip will be flush to the edge of my background. So once I'm happy with that, I'm going to push it in place. Make sure it's nice and straight. And I noticed that my card isn't as busy on the top as it is on the bottom, so I thought I would take those 2 extra butterflies that I didn't use on other spots of my card and adhered it to my clouds. And here is the final card. I absolutely love how it turned out. I love my mason jar. I love the lights that shine out from inside of it, the pretty butterflies. So I dimmed the lights just a little bit here so you could see the lights a little better and see how it glows inside that jar. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. You can find the link to Carrie's video down in the description. I'm so excited to see what she made using the halo lights. If you're new to my channel, I appreciate you stopping by, and I hope you'll hit subscribe and like. Thank you again for watching, and have a wonderful day.